out, and it's our awards. So you can see that we won Best of Show Award in 2011 at VMworld, and then the Gold Award for Business Continuity and Data Protection, and then other awards as well. So here's our agenda today. I'll be introducing our speaker, Kevin Jackson, and he's going to tell you about HAPO Community Credit, give you an overview of his environment, the challenges that he faced with BCDR, and then why they took a look at Zerto, or why they decided to select Zerto. And then I'll go into some details around the product and how you can learn more. So with us today, as I mentioned, we have Kevin Jackson, who is the Senior Network Administrator at HAPO Community Credit. He has over 15 years of IT experience. His key responsibilities include, you can see the entire virtualization environment, so VMware and Citrix, as well as administration for SAN storage and Windows systems, and the management and maintenance of all critical software around the bank. So
and so I apologize if you hear noises from my coworkers. But it shouldn't be too bad. They know I'm speaking right now. Let me give you a little bit of background about the environment of HAPO Credit Union. We're located in southeastern Washington State. Our corporate office is in Richland, Washington. Richland is about 3.5 hours from Seattle or Portland. We have 14 branches. 13 of them are in Washington State. 1 branch is in Oregon. We're a quickly growing credit union. We've grown from 7 employees at the Hanford Nuclear Atomic Project. So HAPO stands for the Hanford Atomic Power Operations. Today we serve any members. They no longer have to work for Hanford. Basically anyone that lives or works in Washington State or Oregon. We're also looking at expanding to Idaho in the next year or two. We currently have about $1.18 billion in member deposits, and we went over $1 billion about 2 years ago. And we currently have about 300 employees at our company here, and I think there's 15 of us in the ISIT department. We began virtualizing in 2008, shortly after I was hired on to work here at HAPO. That was one of my first objectives, was to virtualize our environment. We selected VMware for probably a lot of the same reasons that you do. It's easier to change out your hardware. It's easier to take a system offline. It's easier to move storage, to resize storage, to run and configure multiple network configurations. It's easier to isolate applications. So there's lots of good reasons to virtualize, which I'm sure our environment. And of course, disaster recovery is a lot easier in the first place with VMware prior to having physical boxes. Prior to using Zerto, we did a SAN-based replication. We have two VMware sites, and we have EqualLogic SANs in both locations, and we did site-to-site level replication through the SAN. And of course, that was a lot better than what we were using previously when we have physical servers. But Zerto, as we'll discuss, made quite a big leap above our SAN level replication we were using. And of course, another nice thing about VMware is it's easy to manage. It's easy to provision a new server faster and quicker. It's easier to have an overall look of how your environment's doing. In the credit union, in the banking industry, DR is critical. It's very important to have high levels of uptime, and it's extremely important that we never lose any of our members' financial information. So for us, it's very important that we never lose any data, even within a few minutes. It's just not acceptable for our business for that to happen. For example, our lending software that we use, most of it is paperless. A lot of the members that do loans don't even come into our branches. So, for example, they'll go to a dealer to purchase an automobile, and then that'll all be handled through a web application done online and sent to us. And so it's important that we never lose any of that information for our members. It's important that our software is always up and running, and it's important that we're available for the dealers and the other people who are our customers as well. So we were initially interested in looking at Zerto just because of its recovery point objectives. That was very appealing to us, the idea that we could have our data backed up to within a matter of a few seconds. And so that's what was initially important to us in looking at Zerto. A little bit about our environment. We're running vSphere 5.1. We have 2 sites, one at our main corporate office here in Richland, Washington, and then a second site at a branch in Sunnyside, Washington, which is a town about 45 miles from here. And at our site there, we have at each site we have 12 hosts, and we have we use iSCSI SANs. We have 2 different types of SANs that we use. We use Dell EqualLogic SANs, and we also use Nimble SANs. Nimble is a hybrid type of SAN. We have about 130 virtual machines that we have up and running all the time. About 95% of our environment is virtualized. So basically everything that can be virtualized is virtualized. We're really heavily committed to VMware. Most of our applications, the majority of the time, run out of our main corporate office, the first site, and then our secondary site is primarily on standby. We do have some machines that run out there all the time, and then we use it for testing when we're doing DR testing. Here's a list of some of the applications that we protect here at HAPO, and I won't go over this list in detail, but it's just basically, as I said earlier, almost everything we have is virtualized, and out of that, almost all of it is replicated with Zerto. We replicate our SQL servers, our file servers, our Exchange servers, all of the banking-related software that we use, for example, mortgage-related software, collections-related software, lending software, and all the servers that work together with that kind of thing. So basically, the only thing that we don't replicate with Zerto is parts of our Citrix environment. So our Citrix infrastructure we replicate with Zerto. But if you're familiar with Citrix at all, XenApp and XenDesktop, you provision servers out, and so we don't replicate those cloned provision servers. But everything else inside of our VMware environment is replicated with Zerto. Some of the challenges with BCD are, prior to using Zerto, we did SAN level-based replication, and we did that through VMware Site Recovery Manager. We have 2 types of SANs. We have a Dell EqualLogic SANs, and we also have the Nimble SANs. And part of the challenge prior to using Zerto was that since we were doing SAN level replication, we couldn't replicate between those 2 different types of SANs. And in other words, if I had an EqualLogic volume located at my corporate office, I had to replicate that to an EqualLogic SAN located at the DR, and the same with the Nimble. So everything had to be replicated from one type of SAN to another. And then some of the challenges we ran into was the frequency that we were able to replicate. The most critical servers we would replicate typically hourly. The less critical ones maybe once a day. And so it kind of our disaster recovery policy kind of varied based on how critical a system was, whether or not we'd replicate it to our DR site hourly or daily, or whatever we were doing there. one of the problems we ran into with our array-based replication, and this is particularly true with the Dell EqualLogic, is that with the EqualLogic iSCSI SANs, you need to set aside a lot of space locally to handle your replication. The EqualLogic calls this a local replication reserve. So if I have a volume at my site that I want to replicate to my DR site, not only do I have to have that space for the volume tied up, but I also have to have a pool of a replication reserve that exists locally on that SAN in order to facilitate the replication. And so that prior to using Zerto, that tied up a big chunk of our storage space, because EqualLogic is not always real efficient in the way that it replicates, and so it needs the space set aside in order to handle the replication. And so that space usage added up quickly. And as I mentioned, another challenge we had was that prior to using Zerto, we were tied to those specific storage vendors, and we had to replicate from the same type of SAN from one site to a different site. So it was complicated. We had different schedules for different data stores based on how critical they were. And we do have a fast connection between our sites. Between our corporate office and our DR office, we have a 1 gigabit link. But even with that fast link, replication was limited due to those factors that I mentioned, of just the space that it tied up on the array side. I'll tell you a little about our purchase product. Prior to using Zerto, we were using the VMware vCenter Site Recovery Manager with a SAN-based replication. Site Recovery Manager is a good product, but when we saw what Zerto could do, there really wasn't a comparison anymore. Zerto was just, heads above where SRM was. Some of the issues we ran into with SRM is it was difficult to configure. It made storage vMotion complicated, because with SRM, if you storage vMotion a virtual machine from one data store to a different data store, and you're doing SAN level replication, then that can break SRM. It can break your backup process. So it made storage vMotion complicated. SRM wasn't near as granular as Zerto was. With Zerto, you can do what are called VPGs, virtual protection groups. And in our environment, we typically have almost a one-to-one ratio for VPGs. So in other words, for every virtual machine that we replicate to our DR location, we have a group that handles that. So it makes it really granular when we want to fail over just one machine to our DR location. Another issue with SRM was it's not real easy to test until you have a real disaster. You can do test SRM failovers, but you're not really running out of your DR location. You're just kind of running a test to see if it'll work, and you don't really know for certain that it does. But with Zerto, when we want to do a test our DR, we just actually move the machine from our corporate office to the DR location, and it just runs out of DR, and so it's actually running from there during the business day, and so we know whether it's working or not. If it's not working, then at that time we can can investigate it further and decide what needs to be done. But Zerto makes it a lot easier to kind of do live sorts of tests, real tests where you're running real data from your DR location. Another issue with SRM is that you typically can only use the latest replication point that you have. And so, for example, if you say you wanted to fail back as of 4 hours ago because maybe a database got corrupted, or you get a virus in your environment or something like that, well, with SRM, you're going to be failovering at your latest replication point. But with Zerto, by default, you can go back 4 hours, and if you want to configure it for longer than that, you can do that as well. So that's a nice feature there. And with the Zerto virtual replication, it was easy to install. We installed it fairly quickly. I had a technician that helped me over the phone, and it took a period of about an hour. And in that period, we had Zerto up and running. We didn't have all the replication taking place yet, but we had the infrastructure in place. We did a 30-day free trial to give Zerto a trial out to see how it worked, and we found that it worked as it was advertised. Initially, I was a little skeptical when I heard of Zerto. You know, they promised that you could have recovery points within the seconds, and you know, I was just skeptical of that. And so, but it worked as it was promised. We actually, during our trial, we actually took some of our critical systems and failed them over from our corporate office to our DR office. We took our collection software, which is an application server and a SQL server that are combined, and failed that over to our DR location. And it worked. It was easy. So we found out that typically in our environment, our machines, our RPOs for our machines are about 5 to 10 seconds behind, which is, in our view, that's amazing. Prior to that, at the best, it would be an hour or longer than that. And the time to fail over a machine from our primary site to our DR site from start to finish is typically about 5 or 6 minutes. So it's not down long at all. And when we're doing planned failovers, typically we'll fail our machines over in off hours, so it's not impacting business. But if we do need to do it during the middle of the day for some reason, I know that I can do it in a matter of about 5 or 6 minutes. So that was just amazing. So as part of our company objectives now, we just regularly test all of our virtual machines at our DR location. Typically, we schedule each machine to run at our DR location at least once a year, sometimes more than once a year, and we'll run them there for 1 or 2 business days just to verify and to make our auditors and everyone else happy that we can prove that our DR is working and functioning as we believe it is. Another nice thing that I mentioned is before, when we were using SRM, it was tied to our SAN level replication, but Zerto is storage agnostic. So now I can replicate from an EqualLogic SAN to a Nimble SAN, back and forth. It doesn't matter. Zerto doesn't care what kind of SAN you're using to replicate. Zerto is also very easy to configure with the reverse replication. So I can fail a system over to our DR location. Right away, it replicates it back to the corporate office, and then if I need to fail back, I can. With SRM, that's more complicated to do a failover, set up reverse replication, and fail it back. And so we've just been really happy with Zerto as a product. Was reduced by 43%, and this is the storage at our SANs at our corporate office. Because of the way we were doing the SAN level replication with the EqualLogic SAN, and the way that process is inefficient, and the way you have to reserve space that you set aside to handle that process, it took up a lot of storage space just even to enable replication. And with Zerto, that went away. We don't use any space at all now at our corporate office to handle replication. We're just using the space that the actual data stores and volumes take up. And then at our DR location, Zerto doesn't take very much more space than just the size of a regular volume would be at our location. So that's made it for us that we don't need to purchase storage for the foreseeable future. We're set for a few years, and when we do buy storage in the future, it's going to be because we need to increase our level of IOPS, and it won't be because of storage capacity at all, because Zerto has just freed up so much space by the way it works in our environment. The service levels are great. Like I've told Jennifer before, Zerto helps me to sleep better at night. It's just nice to know that any machine in my environment is only a few seconds behind in replication from my corporate office to my DR location. It's nice to know that in a matter of 6 minutes, I can take a machine that's crashed here and fail it over to DR, and I can have it up in 6 minutes. If I want to have it up as the latest recovery point, I can do that. If I want to have it back as of several hours ago, I can do that. Zerto is very, very easy to use. When I initially started using Site Recovery Manager, there was quite a bit of a learning curve. But with Zerto, just with the technician going over it with me in that hour of the initial install, Zerto was just really intuitive. And just by looking at it, you can see what it's doing and how it's working. And then the nice thing is it makes it super easy to run a DR test whenever you want. Like I said, we do that now regularly as part of our business plan. We fail over a machine or groups of machines throughout the year, and we have never seen any issues. So that kind of gives you an overview of how we're using Zerto in our environment, and we're pretty happy with the product.
Great, Kevin. Thank you so much. That was a really great overview, and those additional details you provided were fantastic. So you can see why I wanted to have a customer on with all of you today, because I can tell you how great Zerto is and easy to use, but hearing from a customer and seeing the benefits that Kevin is getting, how easy it is for him to test, just putting VMs onto his DR site just to run for a couple of days and make sure everything is working. It's a really, really great product. So I'm going to go into a few more details of the product, but one thing I did forget to mention right at the beginning is that you have the opportunity to ask us any questions that you would like. So in that red panel, it popped up for me on the right-hand side of my screen. You'll see a questions box. So you can open that up, type in any questions, and we'll take those at the end, which will be in about 15 to 20 more minutes or so, depending on how quickly I can get through the slides. So one thing I just wanted to point out, and I think Kevin kind of articulated this really nicely, because they were looking at SRM with SAN-based replication. So there's a lot of coordination between the storage team and the virtualization team. So you need to figure out what VMs you want to replicate. You have to map them to a specific LUN, because you have that really tight relationship between the location of the VM and the LUN. You have to make sure they're all together. Then you set up your policies and things like that, and then you kind of have ongoing replication, and you want to be able to test that. That can be challenging. So really, it's just this really complex, manual, and flexible process, which I find kind of ironic, because I bet all of you on the phone virtualized in the first place to make things easier and more flexible. And then you virtualize, and you're there in the production environment, and then you go to DR, and not exactly what you were expecting. But with Zerto, it's really, really easy. You just need to make sure that you have enough space on your target site. You locate all the VMs that are related to that application. You're going to put them together in a group. Kevin mentioned that already, the virtual protection group, and we'll discuss exactly what that is in a couple of slides. And then that's it. You have ongoing replication and management. So with that, we have Zerto Virtual Replication. So we talk about being virtually aware, and what do I mean by that? We replicate VMs and VMDKs. We don't care about LUNs. We don't care about storage volumes. None of those constructs matter to us. It's a software-only solution, so it scales beautifully in the environment. So you don't have a physical appliance that you had maybe 5 hosts hooked up to, and that works really well. But now that you're up to 15 hosts, that one physical appliance really isn't doing the job that you were hoping for. With a software-only solution, you end up with a wonderfully scalable solution. So we provide something called a virtual protection group to give you application consistency, the journal, as Kevin mentioned, to give you point-in-time recovery, and then those really aggressive service levels. So let's take a quick look at the architecture. So here we have a very simple overview of Zerto Virtual Replication. I say simple because here we have 2 sites, and we are able to protect multiple sites. 2 components of the software, the Zerto Virtual Manager and the Zerto Virtual Replication Appliance. The Zerto Virtual Manager plugs right into vCenter Server. It's just another tab within the product. That's the only piece of software that you'll touch. That will push out the virtual replication appliances, manage them, configure them, do everything that needs to be done. The Zerto Virtual Replication Appliance is a small, lightweight piece of software that sits on each ESX host within the environment. It's not a physical appliance. And I want to stress that it's not an agent. This doesn't require ongoing management and maintenance. The Zerto Virtual Manager will handle everything in your environment for you. And then, as Kevin mentioned, you can replicate from anything to anything, and you saw that he was able to reclaim back 30 terabytes of storage, which is just an amazing story. You can see why I wanted him to talk to you today. Because you can use older arrays at your target site, mix and match, do whatever you need to do that makes sense for your business in terms of your spending. Highly scalable, we talked about that already, being a software-only solution. And then we do continuous block-level replication, and that's how we're able to deliver the very aggressive RPOs. So we're constantly replicating. But we are replicating just the changes within the environment, so the impact to the ESX host is very low. We've actually done some benchmark testing, and each of those virtual replication appliances will put like 2 to 5% overhead on the environment. The point-in-time recovery, so that's a journal that sits at your replication site, and that's 1 hour up to 5 days worth of data, and it's very granular. So you can't go back 7 seconds ago, maybe you need to go 2 minutes ago. That point is available for you. And then we do have some bandwidth optimization because we don't want to be dominating your environment, so we have some compression and throttling and things like that. We also provide support for a single vCenter, so if you have remote and branch offices, that's actually a new feature that we announced that was made available in 3.0, which we announced around VMworld. So the virtual protection group, so you heard Kevin mention this as well. So many VMs, many applications rather, have several VMs. You'll have a database server, an application server, maybe a web server, and all those VMs, because they're part of that same application, you want to make sure that they're protected exactly the same way no matter where they are in the environment. So with Zerto, you can select those virtual machines, put them together in one group, and you'll configure your policies, and no matter where they are in the environment, those VMs will be protected in exactly the same manner. So if you have the journal, your SLA targets, all those things will be applied in exactly the same way, no matter if on different stores, different servers, etc. This also is what enables you to use some of those neat features that Kevin mentioned. So like storage remotion, that's not always easy to do if you're using an array features of VMware that have become critical to your business, and replication and protection will not be impacted. So we've talked a lot about the actual replication of the data, so getting it from your protected site to the replication site. We also do full automation for failover, failback, and testing. So all the information gets sent over to your replication site, as we mentioned, then you have to fail over. So you hit the big arrow. If you attend one of our other webinars, we have a demo. You can see what I'm talking about. Actually, I'll show it to you in on one of the GUI slides that I have. And then Zerto will begin to build VMs on the target site. So these are not shadow VMs that are sitting there waiting for you to do something to them. We actually build the virtual machines on the target site. Within the virtual protection group, you've set things up like boot order, IP reconfiguration, things like that. So this process happens really, really fast. And you heard Kevin say that he can get his information up and running at the target site in about 5 or 6 minutes. The click to test anytime, so again, Kevin gave a great review on this as well. They just do testing whenever they feel like it. They can do testing a couple times a year, which in the banking industry, if you're in the banking industry as well, is heavily regulated, as I'm sure you don't need me to tell you. Same thing with healthcare and things like that. They want to make sure that information is going to be available, that it is protected. And then off-site cloning, so with this feature, you're able to create a copy of an application on your target site. So this is really helpful for test devs and things like that, as you heard Kevin mention, because now you're working with an actual production copy of the environment, and it's up and running in 5 or 6 minutes. Now you can do testing, development, whatever you need to do. Backup. The information's already at your target site. Why not take a backup off of that information instead of impacting your production environment? Okay, we have web-based disaster recovery management. So again, released in 3.0, which was around the VMworld timeframe. You can manage from a tablet, from your handheld. And you can see there in the bottom right-hand corner the arrow, so that enables you to fail over if you need to do that. A great use case for this is you don't need vCenter credentials to get access to this. So you might have managers or directors or someone who just needs to get reports, auditors. You can give them access to the web interface, and they'll have access just to Zerto, and they can get their own reports without getting into vCenter. We also have comprehensive reporting, so you'll get an audit report. So that tells you when you fail over, what are the steps that are going to be executed and how long each step is going to take. So again, making auditors happy. You can also get detailed information on resources being consumed, on your production. So, and then if you do chargeback or anything like that, so this is a way to ensure that certain groups, so marketing or finance or things like that, are within the assets that you acquired, and also that you mean the SLA that you promised those groups. So it really simplifies the communication. Private Cloud BCDR, so as Kevin mentioned, he has 2 locations in Richland, Washington and Sunnyside, Washington. And those 2 sites are under his control. But if you decided to try out the cloud, disaster recovery as a service is a great way to do that, because hopefully you're not having disasters regularly. This will be a once-a-year kind of thing where you can evaluate the environment. So it's a great way to evaluate the cloud. And then for those applications that are very challenging for you, maybe you want to give the whole thing to the cloud provider and let them worry about it. So they can do the production and the DR site for you, all in one environment. So you can see why we're really excited about this product and why we really think it's a new way to do disaster recovery. It's truly virtual aware, enterprise class, meets the SLAs that you are hoping to deliver to your business, and it's ready for the cloud. So when you decide to take that step, Zerto will be there to enable that for you. So Kevin and I are able to take questions. If you'd like to email us, there's our contact information as well. Someone who you may not have known is also on the phone with us today is Shannon Snowden, and he's our Senior Technical Marketing Architect. So if you ask me any question that I can't answer, I will probably be passing that over to Shannon. And I can see we do have a couple of questions, and Kevin, this one is for you. He was curious about the automated failover or orchestration. Once your VPGs are set up, is it truly a one-button failover or test?
Yes. So what you do when you have your replication configured, there's an option of whether you want to move the VM or do a failover of the VM. And basically, the difference there is move is going to be a clean shutdown and then an orderly process. And with a failover, it's assuming that your system is down and just going to fail over at its last known good point. And yeah, it's just one button that you click on, and you have an option when you're doing a inside your failover options. You have an option to do a test failover, or you have an option to do a real live failover. And it's just one button, and you just click on it, and then it gives you options if you want to set up a reverse replication back, or just move it permanently to the other site, and it's pretty straightforward.
Okay, great. So Shannon, I think this one's for you. Are there any special infrastructure requirements? What is the requirements for the software?
Well, as Kevin could tell you, it's pretty basic. I think it took all of an hour to get it installed. And essentially, you need network connectivity between your sites. And the Zerto Virtual Manager that you showed in the architecture is installed on a Windows machine, and then it deploys virtual appliances, the VRAs, to each of the hosts in the cluster. And you want to make sure you do that to each host in the cluster to where you don't get an orphan situation. And then you pair sites and create the VPGs as you covered in your slides, Jen. And it's really that intuitive and that straightforward.
Yeah, and one thing just to add to that, Shannon, is so it's VMware vSphere minimum 4.0.
Yeah, it's 4.1 through 5.5 now this week. And so that is an advantage, too, over other products that require, for example, similar vSphere versions, storage versions, firmware, replication software. So all that's gone with Zerto. You simply need to have your basic network connectivity, and then we work with pretty much any production at this point version of vSphere.
Yeah, and just to add to that, you can also, if anyone does have a vCloud environment, we can support that as well. So you can replicate from a vSphere environment to a VMware vCloud environment. And then here's a question that I can actually answer. So is anything built into the product that assists with bandwidth requirements for replication? And yes, they're not built into the product, but we the top of his head, I do not. And then we plug that into the sizing tool, and then you're off and running.
Right. We do have, as Jen said, the bandwidth. Yes?
No, go ahead.
Oh, as Jim was saying, we do have the bandwidth sizing tool. And then as far as how you want to manage the bandwidth, we do have native compression that you can use if you choose, or if you have a third-party product such as a Silver Peak that's doing other things like your VoIP traffic. We work with that as well. So we're not limited to any type of compression hardware that you're using, but we also have our own compression if you don't have that.
Great. And then I think a follow-up question, Shannon, to the minimum requirements is, does it work on a mixed Windows and Unix environment?
So we are installed at the hypervisor level. So any guest that is supported by VMware, if it's Windows, Linux, those type VMs, if it's a supported VM, then we can certainly replicate it, because we're below the VMs where there's no agents in the guest or anything, so we can replicate whatever guest there is running on the vSphere hypervisor.
Okay, great. I think that actually might be it for questions. I'll give everyone one more minute to type in a couple. One that we usually get is, how is the software priced? So it is priced per protected VM. So for example, in Kevin's environment, I think we might actually be protecting all his VMs in his environment, but let's pretend that Kevin had 200 VMs and he was protecting 130. So he only pays for the 130 in his environment that he is protecting. So the other 70, we understand that, you don't really need DR for all of them. Some of them are test dev machines, some of them are duplicate machines, some of them are clones, whatever they are. So we only charge per protected VM. We have a base package that starts with 15 VMs. So we can get you up and running for just shy of $14,000. And that includes 1 year of premium maintenance. Let's see if we have any new questions. So I think that is just about it. Shannon, can you think of any other questions that we normally get in terms of the capabilities?
Yeah, normally we do get one or two about the how we integrate with vCloud Director. And so if you have an internal initiative for vCloud Director integrated solutions, then we are really the only game in town as far as DR goes. We are completely integrated into vCloud Director, and so if you have that as an initiative internally, or if you're looking at a cloud provider, there's a whole cloud ecosystem now that has Zerto, and they'll either have vCloud Director or not, and we work with both platforms. We normally see that question a lot as well, and we just integrate nicely in with all the VMware stack.
Okay, great. Well, I want to thank all of you for staying on with us right until the very end. And Kevin, thank you again so much for joining us today. Again, hearing from our customers is just so powerful. And Shannon, as always, thank you for joining and answering all the questions that I couldn't answer. And everyone, thank you so much. We do have another webinar on October 22nd at 1 p.m. Eastern, where you can join Shannon and I and see a demo of the product. So thank you so much, and have a great day. Take care.